shall overcome. We shall overcome.
Thank you all so very much for coming here today. The reason that we have this annual Martin Luther King birthday celebration, not on Martin Luther King Day, is because that so many communities do have Martin Luther King Day celebrations. It started out a lot stronger. Now it's another shopping day like Columbus Day and Washington's birthday and the rest. So, you know, we have a tendency sometimes to forget just why we commemorate certain individuals in our history. There are only two holidays that celebrate the lives of America. One is George Washington, which we turned into President's Day, and the other is for Martin Luther King. Interestingly, we made it President's Day because we had separate holidays for Abraham Lincoln on February 12th and George Washington on February 22nd. When I was a little boy, we had both of those days off, and we would make little stovepipe hats out of crepe paper and then little hatchets on Washington's birthday. And the reason that Lincoln's was never a national holiday was because of the Confederate states that did not recognize Lincoln, and they were celebrating Jefferson Davis's birthday instead, which didn't catch on either. So consequently, to put the two together, we celebrate President's Day. You know, as the leader of the county, it saddens me that the country is so divided. And the interesting thing about the division, it is not necessarily along racial grounds. You know, you have blacks and whites together on one side arguing with blacks and whites together on the other side, which I guess is a step forward. I don't know. But I do know that when the Black Lives Matter was started just in its infancy, I was on talk radio and someone called up and asked me what I thought about this Black Lives Matter. And I guess naively I said, well, it's been so long where black lives didn't matter. I guess it's nice to make it clear that black lives do matter. And we all know the answer to that is, well, all lives matter. And then, of course, then you have blue lives matter, and you have brown lives matter. It goes on and on. But the reason for it is because for so long in our history, the embarrassment that this country allowed for Jim Crow, allowed for slavery, even though it's not mentioned in the Constitution, it certainly was allowed. And to have to fight a civil war, 600,000 deaths to stop slavery, which, by the way, was a reason for the Civil War. And if your teachers tell you it's any different, there would not have been a civil war. It was not over states' rights. States' rights to do what? Own people? It was over slavery. And then, of course, when slavery was abolished, Jim Crow came in. You know, tomorrow there's going to be a Women's March in Atlantic City and honoring Fannie Lou Hamer. I don't know if that name means a lot to many of you, especially you younger people, but in Mississippi, during the Democrat convention, the black delegation could not sit and vote on president. And that was the 1964 presidency of Lyndon Johnson as a Democrat. Goldwater was the Republican. And she got a lot of press. And when she decided to speak publicly, Lyndon Johnson called a press conference, and her speech was cut short. He was very nervous about the fact that he would lose the southern states if he sided with Fannie Lou Hamer. But when we talk about lives mattering, back in those days they didn't. Fannie Lou was a sharecropper's daughter. She was one of 20. and she wanted to register to vote, and she couldn't. And she was beaten almost to death. And a part of her history, which is very little well known, she went in to have an operation, a small tumor removed. And while she was on the operating table under anesthetic, they gave her a hysterectomy without, of course, her knowledge. They were called in those days southern appendectomies. And that's the way it was, and it was by law, and nobody had to answer for it. So when we talk about lives mattering, there was a very long period of time where certain people's lives mattered less than others. And we ought to be by that by now, regardless of what your political affiliation is. Common sense, decency, and morality should overcome that. With that said, I appreciate you all being here. I want to make mention that we do have some elected officials. Maureen Kern, Vice Chairman of the Freeholder Board. Frank Formica, former chairman, and just a Brett Baker is here. John Risley. Amy Gatto, our chairwoman, is also here. And we've also come a long way here in Atlantic County. We have our first woman, female chairperson of the Atlantic County Board of Freeholders. And we're very proud of the strides we made. 4 of the 9 freeholders now are female. And I remember when there was just one female on the board, and who just also, by coincidence, was an African American. Anybody know who that was? Lillian Bryant. That's absolutely correct. So, with that said, there's always God before country. Reverend Dr. Odinga L. Maddox, from Youth Manager, Atlantic County Office of Workforce Development, will give the invocation.
Let us pray. To our all-wise and all-knowing God, we thank you for this moment of celebration. We thank you for the life and the legacy of Dr. King. We ask now thy blessings upon our gathering, and it is in your name that we do pray. Amen.
Amen. And the flag salute by the first chairwoman in the board's history, Amy Gatto.
Attention, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I didn't forget to do an introduction.
Yes, sir.
Amy was worried. Your life does matter. We're very, very pleased and honored to have as our keynote speaker Reverend Latasha D. Milton, the senior pastor at Asbury United Methodist Church. She holds a Master's of Divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary with a certificate in Black Church Studies. Upon graduation, she was recipient of the Watermauler Leadership Award and the Urban Ministry Award. She also earned a BS degree in pre-med biology and graduated with honors from the University of Southern Mississippi. Wow, here's somebody you ought to be paying attention to. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Reverend Milton.
Good morning. Good morning. I bring you greetings from Asbury United Methodist Church, where they allow me to serve as their senior pastor. I think some of them may be here this morning. If you're from Asbury, raise your hand. Amen. Thank you for following me around. I am humbled and honored this morning to stand before you. I would like to thank Councilman Shabazz and the Atlantic County Executive Board for this opportunity. I stand here this morning on the shoulders of women like Ida B. Wells and Fannie Lou Hamer, who are also natives of Mississippi like myself, who stood up for justice and equality, women who dared to speak truth to power. Congratulations to our honoree for your service and for all that you're doing for the young people in this community. I pray that God will continue to empower you and to speak life into the future leaders of this community and the world. I pray that as seeds are nourished in its becoming and spring forth newness, that seeds of hope will be planted within their spirits that will manifest a harvest in due season. Today, as we gather here to celebrate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, who was a prophet and a drum major for justice. Like Moses, he spoke for those who were disenfranchised and oppressed. Like Moses, he walked through the wilderness of Jim Crow and Jane Crow and called for peace and justice. Like Moses, he stood against the divide and he called peace for those who were seeking it. So for a brief moment this morning, I would like just to talk about we still have work to do. Vincent Harding, in his book titled The Inconvenient Hero, penned these words of a poem by Carl Wendell Himes. And they read, "Now that he is safely dead, let us praise him. Build monuments to his glory, sing hosannas to his name. Dead men make such convenient heroes, for they cannot rise to challenge the images that might fashion from their lives. It's easier to build monuments than to build a better world. So now that he is safely dead, we with ease conscience will teach our children that he was a great man, knowing that the cause for which he lived is still a cause, and the dream for which he died is still a dream, a dead man's dream." End quote. In 1963, Dr. King stood at the March on Washington and delivered what has now become his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. If we came here today to be an agent of change, we would admit that Dr. King's prophetic speech from the mountaintop has been watered down by sound bites. From the depths of his soul, he spoke truth to power as he challenged the systemic issues of inequality and the lack of justice for African Americans and all humanity. Dr. King sounded the clarion trumpet, trumpets, emulating the hollow pits of the powers to be to remind them that in spite of it all, black and brown bodies still were not free. Even as we assemble here this morning, Dr. King's dream still has not been actualized. The essence of freedom is still a mythical illusion for black and brown bodies. I can hear Dr. King speaking from the grave. There's no rest until the shackles of injustice are broken. I can hear him say that it is time to loose the chains of inequality that hold black and brown bodies captive in places of suffering from destruction caused by redlining. As long as the pulse of America's original sin is massaged by divisive rhetoric, people, there's still work to do. As long as standardized test scores of third graders determine the number of prisons to be built in this country, we still have work to do. As long as biased standardized test scores determine if a student will receive a high school diploma, regardless of their GPA, Dr. King still cries from the grave. We cannot become complacent in our fight for our children. They are dependent on us. We are their voice. We cannot settle nor become comfortable with the pedagogy. It's always going to be this way, as long as cages are erected to house children with black and brown bodies. We must channel our inner Fannie Lou Hamer spirit and declare like she did, "I am sick and tired of being sick and tired." People, there's still work to be done. We must let our voices rise above the muffled sounds of our apprehensive colleagues and sound the trumpet for equality and justice for all. We cannot settle for the crumbs from the table when the legacy of our children is on the line. Dr. King said, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All men and women are caught in this inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. He said, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. His voice still cries out from the grave, there's work to do. Until we are able to join hands and see the true essence of the person hand we hold, not as 3/5 are human, but see them in the full essence of which God created them to be, we still have work to do. Until we are able to see all of our children and look them in the eye and tell them that we are leaving them a legacy that has destroyed the foundation of gentrification, we still have work to do. I hear Dr. King crying out from the grave saying, keep the fight and fight on. I hear Dr. King crying out saying, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about those things that matter. I hear Dr. King crying out saying, now is not the time to get comfortable and become complacent. I hear Dr. King crying out saying, the ultimate measure of a man or a woman is not where you stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where you stand at times of challenge and controversy. I hear Dr. King crying out saying, I still have a dream. That one day we will be judged by the content of our character and not the hue of our skin. I hear Dr. King crying out, saying that the same spirit that spoke to me at that kitchen table in Montgomery is still alive and lives in each of you. I hear Dr. King crying out, saying, fight on. I hear Dr. King saying, stand up for justice, stand up for truth, stand up for peace. There's still work to be done.
That was very inspiring. Now, injustice has been everywhere, and we try to improve. I'm going to share a personal story with you. When I was a little boy, my mother was in a horrendous car accident. Not her fault. A cement truck went through a stop sign and hit her. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks, severely hurt, and her face was disfigured. Obviously, to get restitution, went to court after she was healed, got a lawyer, etc. And the judge gave her nothing. Paid the hospital expenses, but as far as her disfigurement, which, by the way, she wore her hair over the front of her face for the rest of her life, the judge's decision was, this is, well, I was 6, in the early 50s, since she is a married woman with 2 children and already settled, her looks are not that important. And that stayed in our legal system for years and years. She was already settled. You know, the fact that divorce may come, or my father may have died, or whatever it may have been, meant nothing to the courts at the time. That was decision. That always stuck in my mind, and it made my mother extraordinarily active as far as equality for rights of everybody. And she would repeat that story continually, and then she would show this Frankenstein gash she had on her head, which she would, it would frighten me as a kid. So she said, if you told me to do something, she said, you better hurry up. Oh well. I called Kaleem Shabazz, who I've been friendly with now for I can't even remember how long, and I said, look, I want to honor someone this year, and I'm kind of out of ideas. Do you know anybody that is deserving? And he said, well, I'll have to think about it. And he came back to me a couple of days later and gave me the name of Shalonda Alston.
Yes.
And you know, I know a lot of people in the community, and I never heard of her. And because being a politician, if you do good things, you want people to know about it. And you want accolades, and after all, if the tree falls and Nobody hears it, doesn't make noise. But I did do my due diligence after the recommendation from Colleen. Wanted to make sure it wasn't a cousin or anybody. And surprisingly, many of the people that I called also did not know who Miss Alston was. But the people that did know was extraordinary, the way she was described and what she does selflessly without any recognition whatsoever. And with that, I thought maybe it's time to recognize this wonderful community spirit individual by Atlantic County. Now, with that said, I want to bring Kaleem up to make the introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Exec. I'm glad that I didn't have to follow Reverend with her dynamic speech. I'm taking notes. I'm going to use some of that. We still have work to do. First of all, let me say, County Exec, thank you so much for continuing this program. This, in my mind, is a needed activity when we come together to focus on the life and works of Dr. King. And we've had an outstanding speaker, and I would suggest to those of you who don't know Shalonda Alston that she is an outstanding honoree. For someone who is elected official, as the county executive said, when we see a crowd of people like this, our first temptation is to make a long speech. I'm going to fight that temptation very hard, not make a long speech. I could just get up and say that this is Shalonda Alston, she is our honoree, and that would be sufficient for the kind of work she's done. I could read her biography that's abbreviated in the program, but that would be an insult to you because you can read that for yourself. Let me say three things about Shalonda Alston and before I present her to you. For those of you who don't know her, there are a lot of people who have good thoughts and good intentions, but sometimes they don't put them into action. Shalonda Alston has good thoughts and good intentions, but she puts them into action. There are a lot of people who, if they can work by themselves, Mr. Exec, they do good work, but they can't work with other people because they have issues and personality problems and concerns. Shalonda Alston can work by herself, but she can also work with other people because she has the kind of personality and the kind of spirit that enables her to work with anybody and to reach out and accept the work and contributions of other people. Then finally, there are people who do things for various reasons. There are many of us who are elected up here. We know people who do things to be seen or to get elected or to get praised. Then there are other people who do things because they have a spirit to help and they have a desire to make things better. And Shalonda Alston is such a person. She does what she does with young people, with young women and young men because she has a sincere, deep-seated desire and zeal to make things better. And she has the personality to work with people to help make things better. And she has ideas that are intelligent and responsible that she puts into action. So without further ado, it's my distinct pleasure, my high honor to present to you those of you who have never heard of her and to introduce to those of you who are going to hear more about her, Shalonda Alston, the 2019 Martin Luther King Award winner.
Why don't we stand out here?
That's why he's the executive.
We also have a proclamation here from the New Jersey Legislature that was brought over by Sullivan, Mazzio, and Amato.
When I was a young girl, I read a paper on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and I received a C on my paper. And I went back to the teacher and I said, I can't get a C on this paper. And she said, why not? I said, because it's about Dr. Martin Luther King. And she said, yes, it is about Dr. Martin Luther King, but you didn't follow my instructions. She never took the grade back. I did maintain a C on that paper. But the next paper I wrote after that one, I wrote it as if Dr. Martin Luther King himself would be reading it. And I received an A. And I wasn't upset because I received a C. I was upset because at that time I felt like that C was a disgrace to the legacy and the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. I realized that when I was a young girl, I thought that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the only person to write about. I was that person that people would say, you know there are other people to write about besides Dr. Martin Luther King, right? And I did, but Dr. Martin Luther King was my hero. And I just said that because I want you all to know how much this means to me. I realized that I stand on the shoulder of giants, those that went forth before me to lay the foundation, to be community driven, to make a change in the lives of others. We are in a community where unity should matter. And so when I think about the people that went on before me, it gave me the not only position, but enthusiasm to continue the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King by laying the foundation to those who will come after me. Those who will be able to stand on my shoulders and our shoulders and not waver. I am so thankful and I am so grateful to be here today. Not because of the work that I do, but because of the community that stands behind me. Anything that you do would mean nothing if you don't have people standing behind you, pushing you forward, encouraging you, telling you can go on, even when it doesn't look like what you want it to look like, telling you that there's another shot, you have another shot to make a difference. I love my community. Whoever thought that a young girl from Atlantic City, from the projects of Baccarat Boulevard, will be standing here accepting an award that has Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s name on it? My mother, God rest her soul, would be godly proud because that was her era. I would just like to say to everyone in this room, first of all, what we do for Christ shall last. Amen. That's first. But when you do something, you're not only doing it for yourself, you're doing it for those that are going to follow behind you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank God, who is the head of my life, but I would like to thank God because He has blessed me to be on this journey. I would like to thank my husband, Perry, for always encouraging me and pushing me forward. I would like to thank the leadership team of the In My Care Mentoring Program, Yvonne, Zena, Maria, Chiquita, all of those who push forward, Adrian, all of those who come out every Friday night, all of those who make sure that the programs are running the way that they're supposed to, for being able to withhold my vision and make it happen. I would like to thank my family. I would like to thank those that in the community that push me forward. I would like to thank those that sit here today, Colleen, Reverend Maddox. I would like to thank them because, you know, Colleen always say that he worked for me. So, I'm going to test that hypothesis when we leave here today. But I would just like to thank all of you who came out today. And I would just like to say, yes, there is still work to do, Reverend, but I am glad to be a part of that work. Amen. So to Dennis Levinson and the entire Atlantic County family, I humbly accept this award, this honor to my community, my friends, and my family. I humbly accept this award on behalf of everyone who puts their hand to the plow and not look back. Amen.
You know, we read about so much negativity, especially in the inner cities. maybe that would turn around if the positive things that occur
Amen.
within the community, folk that really and truly care, that give of themselves with no remuneration, that truly care about their community, about their county, their country, their people, and doesn't get enough. You're inspiring. An extraordinary young lady. And I'm proud to be the county executive. Individuals like you in my county. And I'm also embarrassed because I didn't know you existed. That won't happen again, and please let me know where I can send a donation. It would be my pleasure.
Amen.
Now for the benediction, Reverend Maddox.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. Now may the Lord of grace and mercy keep, bless, and rule over you. It is in his name that we offer prayer, and we leave under his protection and guidance. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody. God bless.
We shall